curve, starting early in the morning, peaking at sort of midday, and then coming down in the evening. But it is very much weather dependent, so we do get a few spikes in there. So just as a note, as I've done on all the slides there, the estimated payback on that was 11.5 years, including the maintenance. There are no repayments due to Sport England for that, but it's just to highlight really the additional payback of when you look at a canopy versus a roof-mounted system. So on to One Leisure St Neots. We've tried to maximise the solar systems, and we've fitted 121 kilowatts on there. These have all been based around the half-hourly data that we would have covered when we came to you previously to present the original idea, and that's the size system that's been suggested from that. Again, covering all the installation, you can see there actually this one's gone on a north-facing roof, which is a little bit different to the norm, but the program and the software has shown that there are good returns on that. So just a couple of quick numbers. That system was commissioned on the 6th of May, and we've generated just over 21,000 kilowatts to date, which equates to just over £5,000. So us managing to install that early on has enabled us to get those savings, both financial. I haven't got the CO2 savings, unfortunately, as it's not offering those on the app at the moment, but I hope to be able to give more details on that in the future. As you can see there, that was the largest roof-mounted system that we did install, with a payback expected of 5.25 years. But again, that will potentially be reduced based on the cost of our electricity usage. On to One Leisure Huntingdon, 101 kilowatts there. Again, the costings are included with maintenance in there, offering a payback of 5.25 years. So far, we've generated from that install just over 16,000 kilowatts, and that equates to just over £4,000. So, and again, that was commissioned on the 6th of May, the same day as St Neots. So obviously, being a slightly smaller system, it will show. And as you can see there on the screenshot from that app, that's the curve I was talking about, where we've had consistent sun throughout the day, where it hasn't spiked up and down. So it's just, I find myself looking at the app regularly, so just to see what we are generating. It's really good to see that we are getting something back for something we've invested in. So as a team, we're really pleased that we've managed to deliver that. We've got a couple of nice aerial shots on the, obviously, St Neots and Huntingdon, as we've managed to get a drone up for those ones. As you'll see when we come on to the next couple of buildings, they're my own photographs from when I was on the roof, as we've not managed to get a drone and provide any better pictures as yet, but they will follow in due course. So One Leisure St Ives Outdoor, 54 kilowatts, estimating 14% of their annual electricity usage. So cost and installation, a lot of it is in the original sort of scaffolding and actual access onto the roofs. So 91,000, and this is our largest payback for the roof mounted systems at 7.5 years. That has reduced from the original because we were looking at over a 10-year payback when I first presented this. So really pleased that we've managed to kind of get that payback down while still delivering a good size system for the building. Again, you'll see on that one, on that particular day, the sun was a bit in and out, so hence the spike. But it's good. What we can do on that app as well as on the PC is look at monthly data, annual data, total data, So it is really good for us to be able to track that, and having discussed that with individual sites as well, they will have access to the app, so they can look at kind of passing these positive messages on to their customers as well, to see that kind of we are heading down the right route for reduction in carbon. The last site on there, again, my own photos, is over at Ramsey. That one is currently in the testing period, so we're just waiting for a witness test from the distribution network, and then that will go live as soon as possible. Hence, I don't have a screenshot on there for that one. But again, really good savings in terms of 18% of their annual electricity usage, with a 5.5 year payback. So again, really positive from our perspective on delivering the 4 systems. So that effectively takes us onto the last slide, which is an overview of the 5 projects in total. Oh yeah. Stage fright. So what we've got there is predicted over 500,000 kilowatts, 500,000, with an annual saving of approximately £140,000 and nearly 100 tons CO2 tons per year. Average payback of all of them, including the solar canopy, is 7 years. So what I would say, just in addition to that, is we're currently looking at selling any excess back to the grid. So Kerry and the team is currently working on looking at contracts to sell any excess to the grid. What we are also going to look at is when we've got actual data after 12 months of actual production, we're then able to investigate storage options with a little bit more certainty. So we will be looking at battery storage at that point and the return on it. I did say last time I was here that battery storage can be very expensive, but hence why we're going to wait that 12 months, wait for some actual data to give us some cost certainty to determine whether it is worth investigating further, or whether we just continue to sell the excess to the grid, or if we can use it in any other way. Technologies change, so there might be new technology in the next 12 months to be able to deliver that. That does effectively conclude. I'd obviously welcome any questions about the installation at all.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Is there anyone on the panel who would like to? I'm going to come to Councillor Criswell first and then Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Yes, we're giving CO2 savings. Is that just on the energy saved, or does that include manufacture and installation? Because if not, it would be nice to know what the payback time is for the carbon footprint.
Oh, thank you. It is actually based on energy saving. The one that I can give actual figures on is the canopy. Is that we've been advised by the manufacturer that the carbon payback on the actual canopy itself was 5 years. So after the 5 years, we will be saving the carbon on that one. I can speak to the contractors, by all means, to kind of get that for the panels on each of the buildings, if that would be of interest.
Thank you, Chairman. If we're promoting our green credentials, I think we need to see the whole picture rather than just a selected amount.
That's it. If you would be able to get that data and report back to us, that'd be extremely appreciated. Although, in my experience, like you say, with the structures, there is a carbon payback, but just seeing those statistics would be appreciated. Coming next to Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. The bulk of my inquiries is about tariff export, but you did touch on that. Obviously we've had a lot of sun lately, and it seems a shame that I don't know how much electricity you use at our leisure centres. I imagine it's quite a lot, but there's some quite big systems, so I'd imagine there is some sort of overflow, if you like. I did have another question specifically related to St Ives. Obviously, I haven't seen it in the flesh, but I was just looking at the images there. Have we had any feedback? Obviously, the facilities are shared by the school. Have we had any feedback from bus drivers or anybody having difficulty negotiating the canopies at all?
Yeah, so just on the payback, we are, as I say, looking at actual data versus used versus export. We can get those figures, so we will get those. We're currently in the process of discussing the export with procurement. So there's a couple of options that we're looking at, and we're hoping to have that tied up fairly soon. With regards to the access at the indoor centre, we did take into consideration the buses. Most of them do drive through the bus lane and then out via the school. But what we did as part of the system is we did map the turning circle for larger vehicles, and we did lose a couple of spaces in the far corner to ensure that we maintained that turning circle, but we did reintroduce more car parking spaces on the entrance to just counterbalance that. But yeah.
Good that it's been considered. Thank you.
Coming next to Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, both of which pick up on what Councillor Criswell and Councillor Shaw have raised. If I start with the photos, the ones of One Leisure Ramsey and the outdoor IVO show quite a significant coverage of panels on the roof, whereas the car park at the indoor IVO, Huntingdon Dryside to a lesser extent, and One Leisure St Neots don't show as much coverage on the roof. I'd be interested to know the reason why some buildings have got more coverage than others, and was there scope to increase the number of panels?
Oh, sorry. Some of that might be purely based on the angle. If we look at Huntingdon, for example, is the one that is probably easier to track. Is the new installations are the black panels, and the blue panels are from a previous installation dating back to 2016, 2017. So the areas that have been left are due to the amount of flues that are on the roof, for example, and access to be able to get to them to maintain them. It might just be the angle, but we have had to allow at least the metre from the edge of the roof, for example, to be able to, that's part of the planning, and it's just the size of the panels versus the roof that they've been put on. But going back to the size of the systems, and we have tried to maximise them where we can, were designed off our half-hourly data that we provided as our electricity usage.
And the second question is picks up on what Councillor Criswell was saying. The common thing is people speak about solar panels and all, they all come from China. So did ours come from China? If they did, is there scope for us to cut the carbon footprint further on any future work we do by having UK-based manufacturers, or are they UK-based manufacturers? I'd be interested to know what scope there is for future panel use and cutting broader carbon footprint down further.
The panels themselves did come from China. Having discussed, we did use two different contractors in terms of installation, and there's a couple of well-branded panels. I don't have them to hand. The majority of contractors in the UK, I don't. It was high teens in terms of how many in terms of the amount of panels used by contractors within the UK. That is something that we can consider in the future if we want to look at so if we do further projects that we look at panels that are potentially made closer to home. I suspect that will have a large cost implication, but absolutely it's something that we can consider and include within the social value side of the tendering process.
Thank you. Just looking at the annual average saving of electricity usage, it works out about 21% on average. Is there any way that is going to increase, do you think? Because it seems a little less than I'd anticipated with all the effort that we've gone to and everything else. I mean, still 21% still good, but I just wondered if there was any scope for improving that.
The battery storage could be a potential because, as we know, looking at the graphs that are on there, that the sun, we are very dependent on the sun. So if we have some kind of dull days, then we're not generating as much. So it would be to look at the actual storage of that. Selling it back to the grid would effectively increase our saving cost, which I haven't factored in those costs because it's not confirmed yet, and I don't want to present something to you that isn't kind of set in stone. So effectively that will reduce the amount because we will get money back in rather than going out. So
Councillor Pitt.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for this report. It's really great to see this work, being completed. And from my point of view, 20% return on investment annually and a really safe bet that it's going to deliver that and probably more is really good. So I'm delighted to see those figures. Anyone who's bought solar panels for their home would be amazed to get that kind of return. But obviously, the scale means we can benefit from that economy. I totally endorse your approach in terms of the battery usage. I think it tends to be that lower return on investment for battery, and it completely depends on our usage. So I think actually to do it in practice for a year sounds like a really sensible route. I can well imagine that after a year we might decide there are other roofs elsewhere in the district we want to put panels on rather than buy batteries. So great to see that. I think Councillor Ulver makes an interesting point about the embedded carbon of shipping things across the world, and we're going to talk about the climate report in a bit, but the energy strategy that's coming up, I think that's a really interesting question about what are the carbon return on investments against the financial return on investment. I mean, this project's delivering both really securely, so it's kind of an easy decision. But that your question plays to that if we can do more of one versus the other, I think that needs to be a strategy that kind of sits behind that rather than a kind of taking it piece by piece. The question I've got, which is possibly overly technical for this meeting, but I'll see how we get on. But I'm interested to know, because we have combined heating and power in our, I think all of our leisure centres, but certainly the larger ones. So that's essentially a gas-powered generator. And so the percentages that we're bringing our electricity bills down by, sort of 17 to 20 odd %, is that looking at what is currently CHP, or are we buying that electricity from the grids currently? I just wanted to understand how that mix is playing out at the moment.
Yeah, so that is purely based on our electricity usage rather than gas usage. You're correct. We do have CHPs currently at the larger swimming pools, so that would be St Ives, St Neots and Huntingdon wet side, which we don't have any solar on at the moment. But that will encompass itself within part of the building energy strategy that we hope to deliver within the next couple of months.
I'm going to come to Councillor Hassel, and then in the interest of time, look to move to the next item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to kind of touch on the storage thing. So concur with everything Councillor Pitt said in terms of just waiting and see how it goes. I do have a battery at home, and I noticed that the whole efficiency goes up massively when you have batteries, because not only are you storing the solar energy that you gain, but I don't know the answer to this question. So my question is really, firstly, are you going to, when you look at storage, are you going to look at the potential as well to use off-peak electricity? Because that's what I do with mine is, so mostly my electricity only costs like 7p a kilowatt hour because I charge the batteries up. But take the points that the batteries it can be quite expensive, but I do understand that the cost of batteries is coming down quite a bit, and potentially could work quite well for us if we get the battery storage right.
Absolutely, we can look at all options of whether we can top up the batteries in the evening. Ideally, we will top them up in the day for usage in the evening, because hopefully if we've got that summer sun, but totally understand that in the winter where we're not getting as much summer sun as we are, that we might have to look at a different model. And that will definitely, that's a valid point that we'll take on board when we do look at the battery options to see whether it is switchable in terms of how we can charge them to make sure that we're getting the best efficiency from them.
If there's no further comments or questions, I'd just like to thank you for... Oh, Councillor Alban, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Following on from the positive work that's been done and put into this report, even without local government reform, whatever it's going to look like, we in you and the team have got a lot of experience. How are we able to share that with other councils, particularly larger parish and town councils that have got public buildings? Are we able to offer that and share that around?
We are, since the canopy, I've got a couple of examples of where it might come in. So since the installation at One Leisure St Ives, I've been in contact with the Seven Forces. They're looking to install a canopy. So we're kind of sharing lessons learned, contractors that we've used, how we procured it, which is really positive. Definitely, we are open to speaking to other councils. We are linked in, which I'm sure Nick will touch on a little bit later with regards to HDC do meet with other councils in terms of talking about projects that they've run, how well they've run, and things like that. So, which is really positive. And we have had another company, just a user of One Leisure St Ives, works for a company in Cambridge, who asked to meet to discuss again the positive aspects of the canopy and which they're looking to do. So I've managed to share that with them as well. Some really positive people have seen it and then taken positive action from it.
No, I'd just like to say thank you for your presentation, the work you've done. As a regular user of One Leisure Huntingdon, it's been very interesting to see the installation works happening there. And it's been an extremely positive piece of work backed by the climate strategy. So thank you for that. And I think that's an incredible segue onto item number 7. So if I can ask Councillor Davenport-Ray and officers to please come and present.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this report and why it's here before you, and then I'm going to pass over to Nick, who leads our Council on Biodiversity work, to do most of the heavy lifting, but I'll be here to help. So in front of you, you have a document that you can see. It's titled 24-25 Quarter 4 CLT Climate Update. I'm aware that you might not have seen that acronym yet, CLT. That means our chief executive and our most senior officers when they meet together. So actually what you're seeing is a report that officers produced for our most senior officers in the council to update them on the progress of how the climate teams have been doing. In the near future, you're also going to receive an annual climate report that will include things like our carbon trajectory, an overall analysis of the last year and how we've been doing. But there are a couple of reasons why we've brought this here to you as well. We wanted to celebrate some of the successes that happened in this particular quarter. There were quite a few. The output for officers in this quarter was quite high on climate work. And we've also had a lot of questions from members that we wanted to answer. There's a lot of strong connections between the report you've just heard. And also, we really feel that work on climate has been building steadily more and more into our business as usual, and we wanted to highlight how well that's been happening. Consequently, I feel that this may lead to some extra topics that you might decide you want to have more scrutiny of and that you might want to add to your forward agenda. I'm aware that you've lost one member of your climate working group, and perhaps that group wants to reconstitute and form a new direction that they want to move in. So that's why this report is in front of you. If you think back to 2022, our council adopted the idea of a climate crisis and an ecological emergency. So our climate strategy touches on both carbon reduction, but also effects on nature and supporting nature. So you'll see some of that through all of these reports. And luckily for you, that means you get to have the report presented by our lead on ecology and nature support across Huntingdonshire. So I'm going to hand across to Nick.
Thanks, Councillor Davenport-Ray. Good evening, panel. Thank you for having me here. First of all, my name's Nick Massey. I am the Biodiversity for All Project Manager. I'm standing in for Harriet Robinson this evening. She is currently starring in a play called And Then There Were None, so good luck to her. She has provided me with lines for this evening, and I will endeavour to do my best for you all, but I undoubtedly won't have all of the details, but I will happily take away any questions and get you a full response. As Laura mentioned, this is an update to show our end of Q4 position in advance of our annual climate update, which will be published for scrutiny on the 10th of July and a full cabinet on the 15th of July. The intention is for all climate activity to be embedded across the council as part of business as usual and will feature in regular updates such as members' briefings. It's not working. No. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to give you an update on the team to promote our climate agenda, this has included Net Zero Villages coverage and our own social media channels such as Huntingdonshire District Council's and Hinchinbrook Country Park's Facebook and Instagram accounts. With the Net Zero Villages grant scheme, we found that this was extremely popular. We had 30 applications and have awarded grants to 11 applicants. We found out that we had the most applications of all of the councils taking part in this throughout the county, and this project definitely fits in with our place strategy as it enables the successful applicants to employ local businesses to deliver work, enabling investment in facilities and longevity, as well as helping to develop further community well-being and satisfaction, knowing that they are contributing to being greener and living in a more sustainable environment. You can.
So I'm hoping that, so this is covering Q4. I'm hoping that back in March, you noticed the press release that talked about all the different grants that we did give out. Councillor Howell and I had the pleasure of looking through all of the applications from all of our rural communities. The Climate Working Group helped us with some of that as well. But in the end, we received over 3 times as many applicants as we had funding available. So we know people all across Huntingdonshire in our rural areas are really interested in this work and want to get on with it. And in the press release, we had a map, and you can see it's not located in any specific location. It's people all over Huntingdonshire who are interested. And in fact, we learned just this week that one of the awards we gave away in War Boys not only received their award, but they've finished their project already as well. So they're very keen. So it's something we're very proud of that happened during Q4.
Thanks. Moving on, the annual Climate Conversation 2025 will be in November. Additionally, there will be community events in Warboys, Stilton, Brampton, and St Ives leading up to this. These events will present opportunities for residents to save money by exploring cost-effective retrofit initiatives, for example, borrowing thermal cameras to see where their heat escapes from their homes. Moving on to the next point, although this is a non-statutory function, it is adding a lot of value. The annual climate report will detail clear links with the place strategy, and some notable examples of our successes can be seen with our work with the Waste Collection Service and how we are supporting them in the transition of all of their fleet to HVO fuel, alongside the current 3 electric vehicles across the service. We have created a shorter training plan available to our staff, which is now available from this month going forward. And there has been a continuation of attending events and building relationships with key groups and partners. Events such as talks with the Friends of Hinchinbrook Country Park, talking at the Invest in Huntingdonshire event, attending St Ives Eco Action meetings, as well as presenting to members at briefings in December 2024 and running events during the Carbon Literacy Week in collaboration with our HR team. Moving on to the next slide, this demonstrates where we want to make a positive example. The energy strategy, which was mentioned and which we're working with Matt on, aims to assess where we can make improvements to our sites, such as Pathfinder, Eastfield House, and so on, to make them more energy efficient, and hopefully this will be ready in July 2025. This will feed into our local area energy plan, which is a county-wide plan. This will allow us to explore economic benefits such as heat mapping. Looking at our fleet review, we've conducted an examination of all of the vehicles, the fuel that they run on, and the carbon saving potential to switch to low carbon alternative fuels. Cabinet approved the use of HVO to all standard diesel vehicles in February 2024, and we are currently out to tender to buy the fuel. Looking at the pathway for the council, the switch over to a green tariff, meaning that all our electricity is sourced through renewable sources. We've had recent confirmation that this is 100% from wind power. More information on this will be presented at the annual climate report. We do know that this tariff is with a French company called Total. The Renewable Energy Guarantee of Origin certificate has now been received. That does confirm it is 100% wind power we're receiving. Where we will enable and encourage. So we will look to enhance environmental aspects of our local plan. Revision of the plan coming up this year, and local plan team were helpful in attending annual climate conversation and explaining what this was. We will continue to deliver the Biodiversity for All program, and that is due for completion in October this year. And we will work with partners to promote and support more active and net zero carbon travel. HDC are in the Love to Ride scheme, and this has been promoted internally, but is something that we're looking to promote further as well.
So one of the things that this report is attempting to demonstrate is in 2022, 2023, we adopted a climate action plan, but we also have a corporate plan that has corporate actions. And so we don't really want to, in the long term, have these two things running beside each other. And so the other scrutiny committee, when they meet next week, they're receiving a Q4 update on the actions that are attached to the corporate plan. So part of our corporate plan is about lowering carbon emissions. And they will receive some really high-level information about the actions that are in the corporate plan that are specifically about lowering carbon emissions. And what you're getting now is much more detail on just these actions. So they'll receive a high-level overview, but because you're the scrutiny committee that includes environment, we wanted you to have a lot more information. So the things that are in the corporate plan have been influenced by what our goals were in the climate strategy. And I think at some point in the future, we'll be able to narrow it down to one to make sure that climate is woven throughout all of the things that we do.
If I can just jump in ahead of the next slide, I'm just conscious that you have quite a number of very detailed slides, and I appreciate the detail you're giving, but I also am conscious of the time that you're giving to us and the time of the panel. So if you can run through slightly quicker, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. The final thing on this slide is the active travel survey, which is led by George McDowell's team. And this is a chance for residents to comment on where they would like to see improvements be made in terms of ease of getting around the district. Yeah, skip that one. Looking at some of the key highlights in Q4, we attended a collaboration event which was part of the Future Fens Integration Adaptation Programme. The aim of this programme was to unlock investment and socioeconomic benefits through joint climate adaptation. In February 24, sorry, wrong date on that, but the HVO went out for tender, and more information will be provided on that in due course. Looking at the locally determined contributions, this is a toolkit designed to help councils reach their carbon net zero targets. And this is a £250,000 project funded through Innovate UK. Also, procurement training has taken place. An ARU professor delivered procurement training to climate facilities and the procurement team. Yeah.
So that point is important to reflect back on our previous item. So we were talking about the idea of where do we get our solar panels from? And this type of procurement training, hopefully in future, means our service areas don't look to the climate strategy to help them determine where to get things from, but that every procurement decision includes some of that analysis of what's the economic effect, the health effect, and the environmental effect. So making our procurement system across the board consider social value.
Looking at the key highlights continued, the home energy handover has now been completed, and the climate coordinator is now administrating this, and they are looking at the eco applications, which is a grant which helps residents receive energy efficiency measures in their home. And then finally, on this bit, the other key point to note is that we have recently recruited a project support officer to help with the administration of the Net Zero Villages grants and also the Bio for All projects as well. And she's hit the ground running and has been doing a great job. Yeah.
So this one is about the budget that was allocated towards climate projects. And the CLT, the senior officers, had asked to see this in terms of where are we spending our climate budget? Are we spending it on things we do, things that we're using to enable climate action, or things we're using to be able to influence? And so you can see some percentages there of how that's broken down. Examples of things we've spent on what we're doing is upgrade of EV charging in some of our car parks. So we spent funds on that. And also on the procurement training I mentioned. An example of the influence is the climate events we've been holding. And then the largest percentage there, 62% on enable. One example I would give is we funded some thermal imaging cameras for Cambridge carbon footprint, meaning that they could operate not just in Cambridge, but in Huntingdonshire as well, and residents can borrow their thermal cameras. I think let's leave that slide there.
One of the key things that Harriet wanted me to mention was that we've started to work with the Huntingdonshire Business Awards, partnering with the Economic Development Team, and have incorporated 2 sustainable awards in this, the Low Carbon Champion and the Waste Reduction Awards. Yeah, we can move to questions as the short and medium term actions have been started now. So
Yeah, so the rest of the slides are quite detailed about different actions. And the one update we wanted to give you is the slide that says short-term actions. Although some of them were outstanding when this report was created, they're all now complete. So 100% complete on the short-term actions.
Perfect. Are there any comments or questions from the Councillor Shaw first?
Thank you. Great report. I'm very proud of the work that HTC's done to progress or encourage climate action. My questions mostly relate to the forward actions, so the fact that you said that certain short-term ones are done. I know I keep banging on about it, but there's on the page 55 of 8 is the update to the procurement rules. It's probably slightly off your topic, but I personally think that awarding local contracts as part of that procurement process, well, it would A, help with our carbon impact, and B, obviously create more jobs and well-being for residents, which leads on to item 8 of tonight's agenda. So it wasn't really, it was a comment more than a question, so I do apologise. I do have a question regarding the long-term actions on page 57. It mentions that the support of the Great Fen project was stopped due to budget constraints from the planning team. How were they contributing? Because I might be getting my wires crossed, but weren't biodiversity net gain credits being used to fund the Great Fen project?
In previous years, our council made a direct financial contribution to the budget of the Great Fen project. That did not happen in 2024-25. So that's what that's referring to. So we're still an active supporter and part of the, it's not a board, but there's a board of advisors, but that specific financial contribution did not continue this financial year.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Great to see a real wealth of welcome, initiatives, interventions. I was tempted to ask about the procurement training that's happened, but actually maybe that's probably a part of a bigger conversation that might come back to this panel. Possibly, I'm not sure, but I think that's really encouraging. Love to know more, but maybe pause that for today. In terms of the energy strategy, which sounds like it's kind of in process already, really excited to understand that's happening. I'll just flag up something I've discussed privately with Councillor Davenport-Ray and others, but I think the key thing for me, the REGO certificates were mentioned. I say there's mixed opinions on the validity of those certificates. I think they're not really worth much. Really, the risk is if 40% of the UK's electricity is renewable, 60% isn't. If 40% of customers buy renewable, it just shifts all the non-renewable to the other people who aren't bothered about, so it's not really moving the needle in any significant way. And I think there's very few electricity providers that have taken that into account and offer something that actually generates more renewable electricity based on a number of customers. Now, it's something that I've discussed with different people over the years, and I don't think we ever got to the bottom of it. I'm really keen that this policy somehow gets to grips with that challenge, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll always go to a different supplier, but I think there should be a policy behind that, behind the decision. So when we renew our contracts, it's not a matter of just making a quick decision on that weekend because these things move really quickly. Can you give us any update on where that's heading to at the moment and what your aspirations are on that front, please?
I think we should have had Matt, who's not here anymore, to answer that question because he's the one working on the energy strategy. It sounds to me like this is something that you might want to add to your forward agenda and have a discussion specifically about that with him here. I think that would be the best way forward, and perhaps on the procurement topic as well. But no, I take all of your points. Yeah, They're things that I think about when reviewing that topic.
Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I think we're bringing a lot of attention to a lot of different areas, and we're moving things forward. I have really a sort of a couple of questions. I think firstly, picking up on Councillor Criswell's point of the previous, it's hard, isn't it, when you're going to save CO2 or whatever. But I think when we are reporting it, we should also look at the carbon footprint of the solar panels or whatever, so that we do that. And it looked like there's on the previous items about a 5-year payback in terms of carbon. The other one, which is a bit sort of left field really, and it comes into biodiversity, and it comes from a trip that Councillor Davenport Ray went to Hinchinbrook Country Park probably 2-3 years ago. And it was mainly because I'd read quite a bit of research on bees, on honeybees specifically. And basically, research suggests that you need to have one honeybee hive every kilometre. Otherwise, the honeybees, which are effectively, the battery hens of the insect world, outcompete other bees, and you don't get any wild bees or bumblebees. And when we visited there, we didn't see any wild bees other than the honeybees around the 13 or 14 hives that are actually in Hinchinbrook Park. And I just wondered whether that had been progressed. I was assured at the time that at some point, it would be looked at. But the answer really is to encourage the hive owners to just disperse the hives across the park, which I think is eminently possible.
That's something I'm happy to raise with the team, and so we can discuss it with the apiary there as well. But yeah, I take your point, and that's something we can feed back on.
I would also add, there's an added challenge that site is used as a training center for beekeepers. And so they are using a variety of different bee hives. If you remember the day we visited there, different styles, different designs, and attempting to train. So I think there probably is a minimum amount of hives that they would have to keep in that one location in order to continue their training.
If I can just come back, I believe though at Little Paxton Pits Nature Reserve, there's also quite a lot of hives. I mean, I know it's very convenient for the beekeepers, but it's not so great for our insect. And if we are going to be a council that promotes biodiversity, I think we should look at it. And like I say, I'll let you take that one away and see what the best solution is.
Perfect. I'm going to come in next, and then we'll go to Councillor Alban. But your presentation mentioned that the CPCA have said that there isn't any more funding for the Net Zero Villages programme coming up. Do you know the reason for that? I'm conscious it was an incredibly popular scheme, and it put about £260,000 of investment in rural communities. So quite curious as to why that's the case.
So in one of my roles, I sat on the Environment Committee of the Combined Authority, and over a year and a half, I observed a £1 million fund that had been sitting there for a long time, earmarked for net zero villages, that was obviously going nowhere. And so I encouraged the officers to turn it into this type of scheme. So they dispersed the money to all of the constituent authorities instead, because we're much closer to our villages and communities, so that we could hand it out. So that was £1 million that had been sitting there for a while. In order to get more funding for that, I did have some hopes, and all of my colleagues on the committee agreed that we wanted to try to budget for that in the future. But because of changes within the Combined Authority and leadership, I think the chances of that have become much less over the last few months, given the direction of that organization. But that it probably is an opportunity for us to tell you some good news. A different fund that I was also linked with there, our council applied into. Nick, do you want to tell us what we've been successful with there?
Yes, with the Climate Opportunities Fund, we successfully we were successful with a bid for £130,000 to look at natural flood defences across the district. And this bid will enable us to trial out 4 different types of natural interventions, the first being leaky dams, The second being riparian buffer zones, the third being sustainable urban drainage systems, and the fourth will be a wetland restoration. So we are at the moment, we're scoping out where we can do these interventions and engaging with our key partners such as the county council and landowners. But yeah, watch this space. We're very excited about the project.
Thank you. That background is really useful, and that is some incredibly positive news there. Coming next to Councillor Orban, and now we'll come to Councillor Bywater.
Thank you, Chair. A few comments and then a couple of questions. I'll try and take them on order. One of the things I've noticed, I know we can't always judge life by what's on social media, but one of the things I've noticed is as the climate business and the climate economy has grown, there's also been a growing cynicism towards green projects. And this bothers me, and I think it's right to question, because we don't, as a society and as a council, always agree where we're going, and always, if we do, we don't always agree on the way to get there. But to my mind, it's about being good stewards of the resources and the economy and the earth that we look after as humanity, and the area that we look after as a district council. The second point I wanted to make, we can't match War Boys having completed their project, but I was delighted when Stilton were awarded money from the Combined Authority money. But I can say that over the last 2 days, the work on the new lights up at the skate park at Stilton as part of the project from there, I was delighted to see that, and very pleased with one of my parish councils who was so proactive and so quick to get involved. And when I spoke to Harriet, she was delighted, and she was delighted when the clerk was delighted. So it was a win-win all the way around. Procurement, really interested to hear the points that Councillor Criswell and Councillor Shaw mentioned, and what's already being discussed. And I think as well as looking at the carbon footprint behind solar panels, we need to look at the carbon footprint behind EVs, because I think that's where I do have some questions, and why I was so pleased to see HVO being rolled out and get some quick wins. Picking up, Nick, on the point you made about flooding, the other suggestion I would use, the experience of the drainage boards and the middle level commissioners, if you're not already doing that. I was at an IDB meeting in Home and Conington board last night, and I'm not a farmer, never made my money from the rural economy in that extent, but the knowledge that was around that table last night that is in the local area, particularly in those areas of the fens where the drainage boards are active, the difference that can make, I think, could be useful. And finally, the local events that you mentioned, I know there's one in Stilton, but the other two I think would be really good. I'm sure, hopefully speak for the other members, if we can be there, we'd like to be and listen to what's going on and what's been said.
Going to come to Councillor Bywater and then Councillor Lowe, and I'll try and get you in, Councillor Shaw, but I'm conscious of time.
There we are. Just warm it up. Thank you. Yeah, very good. And pass on my thanks to Harriet, because I know you and the team have done a lot of work here. And I guess mine's a simple question, really, so I won't be very long. In relation to the budget, through the document, we talk about percentages all the time. And for people dipping into this and who actually look at this from a public point of view, it'd be nice to get the actual cash numbers alongside those percentages, really, because 20%, 27% of the climate budget has been spent on That's great, but what does that equate to, really? I think that's what I'd like to understand, and potentially people who read this report is, what sort of bang for their buck are they getting, really, and how does that correlate to it, really? But that's just an observation. But yeah, well done. There's some great work taking place, that, especially up in our part of the world, so thank you.
Thank you for that. So if you look on the page that has the pie chart, 100% would be £111,000. So our budget was larger than that, but there are a few things that we haven't paid out for yet. For example, the climate budget is where the money will be coming from to pay for the staff to help build community use of food waste caddies, which if you were at the staff online briefing the other night, we talked about that. So a member of the team short term to build on that. So 100% of that pie chart is 111,000.
Cool. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. This is more just my observations. Being the district councillor for Warboys Ward, obviously I'm fully aware of the impact having the cameras from carbon footprint. They've had a biodiversity day at Onyx Field during half term, which was very popular. And the environment working group is going from strength to strength as well. We're getting more people involved. So it's just the small input from HDC has had such a vast impact on the area, and I think it's fantastic. And I would encourage all parish and town councils to apply to carbon footprint for the cameras for winter time to do the thermal imaging.
And back to Councillor Shaw for last question.
Thank you. It's not really a question for you guys, it's a question for you as chair. I would very much like to see the procurement strategy come to this panel for either a presentation or review, or for us to contribute to its creation.
Yeah, we'll take that away and have that discussion. Councillor.
Sorry to drag this a little bit longer. I just wanted to say I don't often make political speeches, but I think it's really great that this is a really evidence-led approach that this council makes, and I think that reflects, given the world politics that's going on, that I feel that the evidence-led approach is reflected in the really mature conversations that we're having, and it's really great to see members from both sides of the chamber, reflecting on the positive impact that this policy is having. So thanks for that debate, everyone.
Well, thank you very much for your time, both. On to our final item of the evening, at number 8, the Community Health and Wellbeing Strategy. So welcome back, Councillor Howell, and thank you, Claudia. I appreciate you're in a slightly different capacity than when you came to this panel at the tail end of last year. So I'll throw it over to you to present. But if you can open with why you've come back and kind of what you're hoping to get from the panel this evening, that would be absolutely brilliant.
Just do a brief introduction to the presentation, and then I'll hand over for the detail to Claudia. So you'll remember that the Community Health and Wealth Building Strategy and the associated fund were approved by the Council in December of 2024. It was supported by the recommendation that updates on progress were brought back to ONS for future involvement in the development of the associated processes and procedures. So this is the first update on the work carried out to date, and to also provide an outline of the next steps to start making this fund available to the community and the voluntary sector to apply for. The Community Health and Wealth Building Strategy Fund is new and different, and to get to this point has therefore taken a little bit longer than we anticipated, because from the outset we wanted to establish a funding model that attracts future investment from partner agencies and organisations, as well as from businesses. To do this, it is vital that we can evidence the value of every pound spent, and this is something that we are confident we will be able to do. So you hopefully remember that last summer we spent time consulting with our communities to try to understand what a good life in Huntingdonshire meant to them. The sessions gathered some excellent perspectives from a wide range of participants, but most importantly, they demonstrated the willingness of residents to get involved, problem solve, and find sustainable solutions from the ground up. We have further community engagement sessions planned for the coming weeks, as well as a workshop with representatives from the community and voluntary sector, who will be tasked with getting into the detail associated with the operation of the fund. So to clarify, we have £750,000 available to the community and voluntary sector over the next 3 years. But this is not a one-off, this is just the starting point, with conversations already underway with potential investors. We intend that the pot will be regularly replenished by a variety of means. This is a significant amount of money, and so obviously we must get it right. We intend to run a pilot pot of funding to the value of £50,000. The process will be run under a proposed model, reviewed and then amended accordingly. It is our intention to welcome funding opportunities up to different values, with more funding being applied for, the more involved the application process will be. All applications, regardless of value, will be considered by a grants panel that will be made up, but not limited to, officers, community representatives, partner organisations. And we do not want the process to be burdensome to those organisations, and we'll consider the impact that participating in that process will have on the participants. I'm delighted to tell you that we have procured a tool that will enable us to demonstrate social impact that any funded project or initiative will have within the district. Social Value Engine is a tried and tested method of evaluating every pound spent against nationally acclaimed data sources. And so for each project, a social value impact card, which Claudia will show you later, will be produced alongside the creation of a documents library that will enable communities to replicate projects. So we are exceptionally keen to get this process underway and invite you all to consider the progress made to date, as well as play the role of critical friend as we continue on this exciting journey. And we value the thoughts and ideas of the ONS committee to help us develop the approach we're going to take on this. So I'll hand over to Claudia for a bit more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Howan. Good evening. Really good to see you all. So in terms of where we're at, Councillor Howe's covered the initial detail within the first few slides that I had. So just moving forward in terms of where we're at and the timescales that we're working to. So as previously mentioned, we've already carried out a number of consultation sessions with residents that were held last year. We gathered lots and lots of information. And we're looking to consolidate that over the coming weeks, but more importantly, understand the importance of getting the process right for the delivery fund. So we have a session also planned with the community and voluntary sector. We'll then move towards implementing a pilot pot of funding where we'll test those methods and then look to evaluate via the grants panel and then move towards a launch for the fuller fund and with a go live of August time for bigger funding streams and then continue to evaluate as we go on. So in terms of the sessions held already with our community, we asked what it means to live a good life in Huntingdonshire. The summary of that was that people felt the need to put people at the heart of services, physical interventions are important, there needs to be a full picture approach, build trust between the public sector and the public, give the community a role in their future. And this continues to be the voice and the opinions that we hear. We're going back to the community with the first session next week to ask those questions again, to bring them up to speed with where we're at on the fund, but also just get a refocus in terms of what it is that we're trying to achieve. The second session will focus on co-producing the mechanisms for delivering the fund, and we'll talk through the steps in terms of involvement from partner organisations as well as the community sector and the decision-making process. So in terms of the pilot pot that we're making available, what we're proposing to do is try a method in the first instance. So we intend to make a pot available and split it into different amounts. Working with the community group and the community and voluntary sector, we intend to open up applications that will focus on specific areas to allow greater consideration and a real focus into those areas. So we'll be looking to welcome applications that increase employment and income, improve physical and mental health, reduce isolation and increase pride of place, and look at the overall happiness of those living within Huntingdonshire. In terms of, we have a grants panel at the moment, we will utilise that process in the first instance. Applications will be considered by that panel and then determined and applicants notified. Once that pilot process has been run, we will sit and review and make amendments based on the findings. So in terms of social value and the measures in terms of the fund, social value is all about the outcomes achieved by an initiative. Measuring the tangible costs and outputs of an activity is straightforward. The greater challenge is giving a value to the benefits it provides. It's even harder to do this in the context of place. We have procured a tool known as the Social Value Engine.
Social return on investment produces a description of how a project creates value and a ratio that states how much social value in pound is created for every pound of investment. This technique is important for calculating social value and wider project benefits. It allows us to communicate the tangible value to society, which may not be recorded by other means, of the actions of organisations and individuals. It also describes the impact of any given intervention on the sustainability of the place where it occurs. So the tool that we're looking to use, we only received our first lot of training yesterday, so we are just learning as we go, but it's incredibly exciting. So it's based on, it's the only accredited tool in terms of social investment. And basically, you input data in terms of the project. You work with a number of proxies, and at the end, it churns out a number of values. So it's a lot more complicated than that, but actually that's what you get at the end. And it breaks the areas down so that you can actually see what you're getting out of every project that receives funding on every pound spent. So as we move towards the bigger pot of money, so once we've completed the pilot, the process is that we will split the bigger amount into certain values. That hasn't been decided yet and will be considered as part of the community consultation and the work that we do with the voluntary community and voluntary sector. Something that we're talking to the VCS about is the process, and we are looking to. We don't want to make it burdensome. We want to attract a huge variety of people to apply, so some of our smaller groups, but also bigger organisations who can deliver at scale and tackle the really challenging problems. In terms of process, we have looked to work with Hunt's Forum to implement an expression of interest process. So where groups are applying for bigger pots of money, they receive the support needed to come forward with an idea and develop it into a project or initiative that has the ability to succeed from the outset with the support of that guidance. As Councillor Howell mentioned, it's our intention that this is just the starting point. So we start with this amount of money, but we've already started having conversations with partner organisations as well as businesses around future investment. There is a real interest in this way of working, and there is a keenness to look at funds that already operate across the district and across Cambridgeshire and to allocate funding in this way, especially as we'll have a model that can be applied in the same way as we're looking to do with this fund. So in terms of a summary of where we are, we're in the final stages of preparation of the first release of funding. So that's our pilot fund. In doing this, we'll be continuing to co-design with our communities, and this is important. We stated this and confirmed this within our strategy. Our intention is to pilot our approach and learn from it. We have built into our work a rigorous assessment of return on investment. When the pilot is concluded, we will expand the fund and move into another gear. Alongside the direct grants, we are working with others on this approach too, such as NWAFT and the Anchor scheme. So that's a project that we secured funding via UK Shared Prosperity Fund to look to, we have a post based with NWAFT to look to recruit to employment opportunities within the build of the new Hinchinbrook Hospital, but also employment opportunities moving forward. So that's absolutely addressing the concerns that you need to be a nurse or a doctor to work in a hospital. There's a variety of opportunities around varying roles through to low skilled and through to high skilled. That's just one of the projects that we're working on with partners at the moment. And in terms of we have work to do on maximising the return from our procurement activities, we recognise that this hasn't developed as quickly as we hoped, but we're still working on it. So in terms of questions for yourselves and involvement, we are seeking a different type input from ONS. Our focus today is not on reviewing and commenting on detailed policies or approaches. This is about shaping strategy and enabling officers to deliver practical services. We will use your input alongside the co-production we do with communities. We would like you to provide input and review and suggest the following themes for us to work through. Be a constructive, critical friend. Are there issues that matter to local people and the local community we need to bear in mind? And are there things we could be doing but are not currently part of the proposed approach? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come to the panel for comments or questions. Councillor Orban, and then we'll go to Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. The things that, as you were talking, as you were both talking, that sprung to mind are the most vulnerable in society, particularly in rural areas. Without doing down the problems there are in urban deprivation, there are villages at the extremities of Huntingdonshire, particularly in the west, and in my ward and Councillor Patel's ward in the north, that are far away from facilities, not particularly served by rural transport. There's issues of rural loneliness, and that affects not just older people, but younger people in isolation, not old enough to drive, not well served by a bus, reliant on parents or parent or guardian. And I think that's something that I would suggest for consideration.
Thank you. And as part of the consultation, we're reaching out to groups across the district to hear some of those views within the kind of voluntary sector that are working perhaps with some of those younger people as well as the older residents as well.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Shaw and then Councillor Hassel.
Thank you, Chair. I had some questions, but I'm not going to bother with that because in the interest of keeping it on the sort of making suggestions, I personally would like to see some projects related to employment, perhaps particularly young people, school leavers and what have you. I know my daughter's struggled to find employment. I know friends, children in the local area that struggle to find employment, and perhaps tying that in with potential future employment prospects like the hospital build and things like that. Another thought, and again it may be outside of this remit, but I know the can't remember the name of the no, it's gone. Basically, reducing food waste. I don't know whether that could be involved in a project like this, but it would help people save money, which will increase their well-being and also help reduce waste. I don't know if anything like that could be done. And I agree with Councillor Orban's comments regarding social isolation, particularly sort of elderly people who tend to be on their own, struggle to communicate and engage with other people. And I think perhaps Hunt's Forum would perhaps be best suited to assist with that. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
Coming to Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think one of the things that struck me was the social value engine that came out, because I think that one of the challenges with all these projects is that they're all undoubtedly laudable, whatever comes across, we want to do it, don't we? So how do you fund one and not another? And so this engine potentially looks like it could be a really good way of distinguishing between perhaps the good and then the better projects. So I hope that's it. I guess I didn't quite understand it, and maybe if you only got it yesterday, then it's probably a bit challenging. But am I right in thinking on the slide that the social return on investment was £11.43? Yeah, so that seems to be quite a small amount of return on investment. But like I say, you only got it yesterday.
So that's just an example. So it's just numbers put in, and what we'd really like to do. So we've got in the next couple of weeks, we've identified some projects that have been funded through the Community Chest scheme to run them through the tool, and I'd be really pleased to share the outcome of those so that we can share some slides, the social impact slides that actually some projects you might be familiar with, you've seen them, they've happened within our communities, so we can run them through and then you'll have an understanding of how it's broken down and what the return is.
Oh, sorry, can I let John Taylor in?
Just a little extra detail as well on what the social value engine does. So a bit of background, it is a product used by many other local authorities and organisations to benchmark and show their performance back on this. So we're not the first to use it. There's a really good established user community out there that we can gain from. The way that it operates is it uses a whole host of peer-reviewed financial assessments around benefits. And those are peer-reviewed, peer-challenged, and it's an accredited engine so that there are challenges around the values that are produced. And if they're not right, people will push that and change those numbers. So what it will allow us to do is firstly to model out the likely return on investment in cash terms across the sectors on potential investment opportunities. So it gives us a tool to be able to make choices about where we make our investment. But more importantly, when it does get used against a decision that we've created an investment, something is happening, we can report back. And we can report back over time. It's not just a one-off report that says that's the number. The ongoing delivery of that benefit is something that we can work our way through, and we will have a process in place to make sure that those numbers are benchmarked, they are pulled back, and they are presented back in dashboards. So it's a really comprehensive tool. Whilst we've only had it for a day or so, lots of organisations are using it for years. So I'm really confident it will give us some really good results.
Yeah, so I really welcome those comments. I guess my concern of in this particular area has always been, how to measure something, how to measure one project to another. And so I'm really pleased that we're going to calibrate it with some of the things that we've, projects that we've run before in the community chest. So I think that's excellent, and it also helps with, I think, the points I made earlier on around value for money. So that should help us to demonstrate to our external auditors that we are delivering value for money to residents in projects like this. Because £750,000 is a lot of money to spend, whereas if we've got a tool like this, we should be able to demonstrate far better that we're actually delivering value for money for residents, which is kind of why we're here, really, isn't it?
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. Just to pick up on Councillor Hassel's point, that £11.43, that is per pound of money spent. So the impact, looking at £20,000 impact, gives a £236,000. 20,000 input, 236,000 impact. So I think the offer to, if we can have some examples, I think that'd be great, because it's really good to hear it's a peer-reviewed platform, but I'd love to see how that plays out in practice. I'm sure other members of the committee would as well. Just points I wanted to raise. So it's great to see Councillor Howell in this role, and congratulations. I'm delighted to see this portfolio in safe hands. Really excited. I mean, I'm new to ONS, but it's really great to see some open questions. I think this is really where we can add a lot of value to the democratic process. Also delighted the co-production. I think so often the people who benefit from things aren't asked in the design, and they say, well, this isn't what we wanted. And actually to go to them to say, this is what we're thinking about, what do you think? I think this is really going to prove really fruitful. I think the timing is quite tight, so I recognise we all want to get on with this. But in terms of, so I've sat on quite a few grant panels for this council, another council, and another organisation, and I've applied for quite a few grants over the years. And I think there's two groups of people that apply for grants. There's people that kind of have a project and then go and find some money to fit the project, and then there's a much smaller group of people who kind of keep an eye out actively and then think, well, I'm going to design a project to fit that brief. And kind of as a grant provider, we want the latter people to see this fund and say, right, we're going to do something we wouldn't have already done because this money's available, and we agree that it's a good thing to do. In that scenario, the timing is always going to be a challenge. So I think with that pilot, which I totally think is the right thing to do, we might need to go and reach out to those people rather than just hope that they'll spot it. I think that might be the way forward there. The other reflection I have is, essentially, particularly on community chest, I think so Councillor Hassel and I sat on that grant panel for a little while, and I think we saw a lot of applications that were for things that we thought probably would happen without the funding. So it might be for new equipment or new kit for teams, and we thought, well, this is all great, but actually is our funding going to make the difference, or is it something that they'll happily take the free money, but they'll probably find a way through regardless? And I think that's always going to be a challenge for any grant pot. And so I think the social value engine looks like it's going to be really useful for understanding the impact. But actually, there should be that additionality built, if it's not built into that formula behind the software, to include that into the sort of decision-making process. So yeah, I'm really delighted that you've come to ask us about what we think is important. I think the risk with the fund is because social inclusion, I forget the language, is such a broad scheme that almost any kind of worthy cause could be deemed to be inclusive in that. So I think it's really important that the fund is quite specific in the way it reaches demographics. And I think the examples that have been given already this evening, particularly rural isolation and school leavers. In fact, school leavers is one of the ones I was going to flag up. There's so many people that come out of the formal education system, and if they go to university, there's a pathway for them. And if they don't, they're kind of just left to their own devices. And I know there's a huge number of people that are economically inactive, and particularly with low mental health. And I think those sort of things would be a really great focus for this fund. While I'm here, a couple of other things that I would love this fund to have a specific focus on. So physical activity and social connection, the two themes, sport, group or team sports and group fitness groups cover both of those really well. And so if there's some way of reaching those groups, I think that would be really valuable. And then the third one that I think I've probably mentioned to Claudia and possibly to Sally in the past, but I think that social connection thing, I reflect upon those at Loves Farm where I live. People talk about it being a really good community. And I think, well, what is that thing? What's the thing that happens there that doesn't happen where I used to live in Tottenham? And I think the answer is I know my neighbours. It's as simple as that. I can go and knock on a door and ask for a bag of sugar or whatever it is. Or if the example I've used before is if my child needs to go to hospital and my other kid's at home, I can go to any of 10 doors and say, can you just sit with my other child until someone else comes around? Couldn't do that in London. And I think that's such a valuable thing. But a lot of people don't have that across Huntingdonshire, I'm sure. And so any kind of projects that break down that barrier of, you know your neighbour to wave to them, but can you get to the place where you have that sort of security that you know your neighbours enough to be able to trust them? And I think that's just through familiarity and giving those opportunities for those people to congregate somewhere almost, but we're really hyper-local. So I think if there was a focus, I'm really keen we have focuses for this fund so the applicants know what they're trying to achieve and know what the council's trying to achieve. And those are the three that I'd put forward as being really valuable. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. That's really useful. And I think the other part of this is as well, so there'll absolutely be projects that will come forward and won't fit. And it's about how do we match them up with something else? So it isn't just an idea and then we can't take it forward. We obviously have our contract with Hunts Forum and the support that they provide to the voluntary and community sector. And it's making those opportunities available to groups that have an idea but just doesn't fit within, like you say, the very focused area where we want to see this money spent. I think the other thing is as well is the examples you all give are excellent, and that's what we want to know, because actually there you are those representatives that are talking to the people, you know your communities the most. So it's about sharing those with us so that we can really focus the fund into those targeted areas.
I'm going to jump in ahead of Councillor Lowe, because if you've said something that was on the point I was going to raise there about kind of councillors knowing their communities and kind of having that insight. When it comes to part of the approach you're taking, are you thinking about involving ward members throughout the whole process, kind of through the life cycle of any projects that may receive a grant?
So the exact detail hasn't been determined yet, but actually if that's something that we don't want the process to be too burdensome to anybody, but we want that involvement. So actually that suggestion of at this point could be notified of applications that are successful, aren't successful, any of those ideas would be appreciated.
No, and that would be absolutely brilliant. And because of, like you may say, I'm conscious about keeping things light and flexible when needed. And I think the last thing that certain groups need is me sitting over their shoulder, kind of when they're just trying to get something done. But that involvement, I think, can be really beneficial throughout the process. John?
And one quick additional point as well. I know I sound like a salesman for the social value engine. That's not my intention. But one of the things that the tool allows us to do is to geotag the bids so the postcode is there. So that allows us to separate the benefits back across the patch. So one of the reports that I think we'll be able to run will be to give that insight into local ward members. So where the money's been spent in that area, what's the payback? And I think that's really quite important. It touches on Councillor Hassell's point around value for money, identifying the benefit and where it's felt in the sectors. So that's one extra component I think that could be really useful for ward members in particular.
Thank you. Just to say as well, as part of this work, we're going to create a library of projects. Sorry, there is always an opportunity to replicate initiatives, you know, in all across the district, really. And it's just giving groups that starting point. So for every project, there will be a brief, almost like an instruction sheet, very brief instruction sheet, so that should somebody come along with a similar idea, we can say, well, actually, this has been tried, tested, funded over here. Would you like to, you know, go and speak to the group? Let's do those introductions. So we are looking to continually share that best practice through a projects library as well.
There we go. Apologies for jumping in, but Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. No, it was just really to sort of say, are you going to be working with organisations like Age UK who are desperate for volunteers for their befriending service? Because I know that, you know, they've been looking for people in St Neots area, and I volunteer in Somersham. You know, it's a great service because the volunteer gets something out of it, as does the resident who has requested some contact with people. I think it's a great idea, and if especially to tie in with those organisations that have the ability to offer the services and to support them, even if it's just to try and advertise the service for them or suggest to other people, you know, that there is this service available. And as what Councillor Pitt was saying earlier about school leavers, I think also care leavers are a great group of people that might go through the cracks. So I think they are another lot to engage with. Thank you.
Thank you. So just in response to your first question, the event, the consultation session that we're holding with the VCS, Age UK are invited to, I think that will also be an opportunity for organisations like themselves to share some of their problems. So it will be used as doubling up as really a networking opportunity as well. So hopefully they'll be able to share some of those problems and we can help find solutions. And I agree in terms of the care leaver space as well. So thank you.
Councillor Hassell.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually just picking up on what I think was really a recommendation from yourself, and I always like, as you know, to for the committee to make a recommendation back to cabinet, and so I think that the recommendation that I would make is that we do inform ward members of projects that are occurring in their wards, particularly as we all tend to attend our parish councils and things like that. So it's good PR for HDC to let parish councils and residents know what's actually happening in their area, and also we can put it into our reports. So that would be my recommendation.
So point of clarity, that this report won't be going back to cabinet, but I would absolutely agree with the point you've made about how I think that would be extremely positive. So if the team is willing to make that a part of the proposals going forward, that would be extremely appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. You mentioned about having a record that other groups can replicate, and first of all, I want to say absolutely that would be brilliant. Just reflecting on the conversation, Park Run is like the gold standard of when this works well. It was just a single project, probably started with, a tenner. I don't know how much they spent getting it going, but it was just a simple, good idea that didn't require central funding or grand strategy. It just grew organically, and we would love to have anything that remotely resembled that. But I think that needs to be part of the kind of assessment criteria again, is like, what's the thing that is going to just make sense and work in a way that we can leave a legacy beyond the funding. So I would love for that to be built into the process. And I guess also on top of that, it might be that a grant might not be the way that delivers that. It could actually be figuring out something and going to the group that is going to be able to deliver it and commissioning them rather than doing grant giving, which I know is on the cards as part of the way this fund might be spent. But so I think grant giving can be brilliant. It can sometimes just end up being little isolated pockets of well-meaning activity, but once the funding runs out, the project dissipates. So I think we're all in agreement, but I would love for that to be a real focus in the way the funding is spent, to try and find those projects or those ideas that are going to have that ripple effect and that long-lasting legacy that goes beyond the initial investment.
Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Shaw?
Thank you. It's a half-formed idea which has just sort of sprung into my head while we were sitting here, if I'm totally honest with you. I wonder if there perhaps could be some link to music and in bringing people together, for example, like supporting choirs or something like that to help with social isolation, or often when you're at school or whatever, you get instruments and areas and stuff to play with musical instruments, but once you get older, to sort of my sort of age, you lose that interaction with people and equipment that makes that possible. It could be as simple as just creating a space for people to turn up and play guitar or whatever they want to do, or form a band or something like that. But I think that could help with people's mental well-being. Just thought.
Is there anything else from the panel? In that case, I'm going to ask the question to yourself, Councillor Howler and Claudia. Do you think you've got what you've needed from this opportunity?
I think there's been loads and loads of really brilliant ideas, and there's going to be lots and lots of talking and thinking, I think, going on.
Yeah, no, perfect. Well, John.
And one quick point from myself and Becky, really. This is one of the first times we've brought back a topic like this. So we've not turned up with a great big paper with loads of details in it. We've sought to engage in a slightly different way with yourselves. If there's any feedback around how that's worked, what was good and what wasn't so good, and what we might want to do next time, please can you let Becky and myself know, and then we can work through chair and vice chair to make sure the experience is as good as it can be. In particular, we're lining up, obviously, work with Councillor Hassell's proposals, the Community Safety Partnership. How we present those to these meetings, I think, is really important. So any feedback on how that's worked for you would be really gratefully received. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I personally quite liked it. I was tempted to ask questions about the content of the report and how it's going to work, but that doesn't really add any value other than my own understanding. I quite like the sort of, the idea that of making suggestions. It feels a bit more like we're contributing. So, I like it. Thank you.
Well, in that case, I'm glad that the panel's been of use. So thank you very much for your time. It's been very interesting to see us back and have the chance to contribute again. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. So I'd like to thank all panel members and wish them a good evening.